In a quiet, protected fjord, a pod of humpback whales breaks the morning silence. Then these gentle giants vanish. On a nearby creek, millions of salmon surge up the clear waters, instinctively heading to their spawning grounds. Everywhere you look, there is water, leaping in a rainstorm, tumbling toward the sea, or mirroring the pristine wilderness on its glassy surface. The Inside Passage of Alaska, a marvelous watery world, is one of the most scenic places in all the earth. It is both playground and restaurant for all types of wild creatures. Since the glaciers first retreated, this has been the ancestral home for Alaska's first people. It is also former home of Russian fur traders. And this is current home for a hardy band of Alaskans who don't mind their weather or their recreation a little on the wet side.
Good job. Oh, you got it. That's skinny.
Residents include commercial fishermen and totem pole carvers, even dog mushers. Southeast Alaska and all its bounty is like a magnet that draws many thousands north, and if they're not careful, holds them here for a lifetime.
I came to Alaska in 1950 on a passenger boat, and when we got to Juneau, it was going on to Skagway, but when we got here, I jumped ship, literally, because it was a beautiful sunny day, and I came from Los Angeles. So, you know, just couldn't believe how gorgeous it was here. And I've been here ever since.
The lure of this glacier-filled land also attracts visitors by the thousands. They arrive in sleek cruise liners or paddling tiny kayaks. But it seems all come for the same reasons: to breathe in the fresh glacier-cooled air, to see waterfalls cascading into emerald fjords, to cruise beneath granite monoliths rising from the sea, to know firsthand that a wilderness like Alaska is not a myth, but a place you can touch and sense and feel. Southeast Alaska is composed of over 1,000 sheltered islands and a 525-mile strip of mainland hugging British Columbia. Nearly 3/4 of the area is carpeted with the lush green hues of the Tongass National Forest. Almost all of this region is inaccessible except by air or by sea. It's very possible that steps taken on an isolated beach or atop a mountain ridge are the first ever by man. Our tour of the top attractions of the Inside Passage will begin in the south at Vancouver, British Columbia. Then, following the route taken by many cruise ships, we'll journey north 1,000 miles, visiting the main ports of call, including Ketchikan, Wrangell, Petersburg, Sitka, Juneau, Skagway, and Haines. This video postcard will also take you to Seward on Resurrection Bay, gateway to the Kenai Fjords, and home of the Alaska Sea Life Center. Vancouver, British Columbia is the southern terminus for most cruise ships that make their way to Alaska. This cosmopolitan city is an inviting, vibrant metropolis full of interesting places and people. The cruise ship terminal is called Canada Place. This is either the first port or last stop, depending on the cruise itinerary. Lucky round-trip passengers will get to see Vancouver twice. Heading north through the protected waterways, our first stop on this top attractions tour is Ketchikan. This is Ketchikan, an island community built along the waterfront between Tongass Narrows and Deer Mountain. It is Alaska's fourth largest city. During the summer, Ketchikan is a bustling, busy place with the buzz of float planes and the comings and goings of cruise ships. The ships are like luxury hotels, and the float planes are air taxis. They're really essential to life in Southeast Alaska. When you have a float plane, you don't need an airport, just a long enough stretch of water to set your floats onto. Without roads connecting the communities, the float planes provide every type of service. They are commuter airlines and recreational vehicles. They take visitors on flight-seeing trips and handle the mail. If you live in an out-of-the-way town and are waiting for express delivery, say of the latest computer equipment, it'll probably be on this afternoon's plane. Ketchikan might be the place you ride in a float plane for the very first time, or your first time on a salmon charter, your first time in a kayak. As the first port of call for many cruise ships, it's a city of firsts, and that's the reason locals call their home Alaska's first city. Throughout the summer, it's a street fair-like atmosphere, with a smorgasbord of shopping and sightseeing right on the waterfront. When you're done on the waterfront, you can rise above it all. A tram to the Cape Fox Hotel gives you a raven's eye view of Alaska's first city. On a sunny day, It's hard to imagine that it often rains in Ketchikan by the bucketful, but it does. An average of over 150 inches of rain per year. That's almost 13 feet. But Ketchikan is not the rainiest place in southeast Alaska. That distinction goes to Little Port Walter, where rain falls an average 224 inches per year. Downtown Juneau receives an average 110 inches, while at the Juneau Airport, it's only half that. Skagway is the dry land, with a slim 28 inches per year. So you can imagine that in the rainier areas like Ketchikan, locals and visitors get a charge out of blue sky days. With the thermometer rising, there's only one thing for a kid in K-Town to do. Historically, Ketchikan was a native fish camp. It grew on the banks of Ketchikan Creek into the salmon capital of the world, another title Ketchikan proudly holds on to from the early days. The salmon still return up Ketchikan Creek to spawn. That is, if they make it past all the fishing lines at the mouth of the creek. Commercial salmon fishing and the shore-based canneries are still a main part of the economy here. And the local waters offer anglers a chance to catch one of Alaska's famous biting salmon.
There's a nice one.
Hang on. Pick up just a little bit on him. There we go. Got him. Good job.
A walking tour of downtown Ketchikan will take you past the colorful boat harbors where the salmon fleet waits for the next opening. You'll also see Creek Street, a street built on boardwalks and stilts above Ketchikan Creek. While visitors today enjoy the picturesque shops and colorful atmosphere, you soon discover that Creek Street has its roots in the world's oldest profession. For over a half century, this was Ketchikan's infamous red light district. Local entrepreneurs make the most of the street's history. Dolly's House, a former brothel, is now a museum, and it's open to the public, for a small fee, of course. One of the best ways to see Creek Street is from creek level. This is Ketchikan up close and personal, a history and kayak tour. Visitors fresh off the cruise ships are first taught how to paddle and handle a 2 or 3 person kayak. After the dockside lesson, it's time to explore the calm waters along the shoreline. This sea-level perspective of Alaska is a whole lot different than the view from the railing of the cruise ship several stories above. This is the way Alaska natives traveled for centuries, sometimes paddling thousands of miles in kayak-like boats they called bidarkas. Naturalist John Muir traveled the coast of Alaska in much the same way. Kayaking is a fun way to get around and part of the way of life along coastal Alaska. Another unique water attraction is a canoe trip on a mountain lake.
We could have some forward strokes.
The 37-foot canoes are styled after canoes used by coastal Indians to travel up and down the Inside Passage. The native influence is seen throughout Ketchikan. This is Saxman, a Tlingit Indian village just 3 miles south of Ketchikan. At Saxman, you can walk among one of the largest arrays of authentic totem poles in the world. Most of these totems are replicas of poles which once stood at villages abandoned by Tlingits when they moved to Saxman in the late 1800s. During the 1930s, a concerted effort was made to collect old totem poles. Over 100 abandoned and decaying poles were restored, copied, or recarved from memory and placed in totem parks around southeast Alaska. These are some of the area's original totems and house posts. They've been preserved and are on display at Ketchikan's Totem Heritage Center. This totem park is at the village of Kluwalk on nearby Prince of Wales Island. Some of these are memorial poles which were carved to honor an individual upon their death. Other totems tell stories or commemorate important events. They also might publicly ridicule an individual or family. Still others can only be interpreted by the carver. The art of carving totems was almost lost, but today, master carvers and their apprentices continue in the wood chip-covered footsteps of their forefathers. Darrell DeWitt is one of the carvers at the Saxman carving facility.
It's all technique, really. You have to make sure that you hold it close to your body and just let the tool do all the work, let it fall. And of course, once you establish a line, you want to follow that line, and then when you go back to reestablish another line, you want to make sure you follow the previous line you've already chipped. So what you're doing is creating a pattern, and also what you're also doing is pushing the wood fibers closer together. So it's actually like adding a coat onto the wood. The western red cedar is the tree of choice that we use for carving. These, of course, are fairly nice-sized pieces of wood. The largest one found on record would be the one that was found in Quay Charlottes, and it was 14 foot in diameter. And this one, of course, is roughly right around 6. I'm 6 foot tall myself. This is our inventory of poles material. Of course, Lee Wallace is one of our carvers here, and he has his name written on this one here. And this is most likely be a house pillar pole, being it's so large.
This is the Beaver Tribal House at Saxman, home of the Cape Fox Dancers. A second large display of totem poles is found at Ketchikan's Totem Bite Park. In a clearing along Tongass Narrows, 14 totem poles of Tlingit and Haida origin stand as silent sentinels. This was the location of a former Tlingit Indian campsite. All of these poles were placed here as the result of restoration efforts by the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s, including the construction of this community house. Another way to tell stories is through song and dance. These dancers are from the Tsimshian community of Metlakatla on Annette Island, and they're about to do the salmon dance.
The center are the 4 species of salmon. For today, we're going to catch some salmon. The outer circle turns into the actual net. You can almost see those cork lines bobbing over the ripples of the water, where they're going to close up that net, and they're going to catch some salmon today. And that's the salmon we're going to put on the fire pit for you for lunch. I'm very glad that you picked Metlakatla and that the fourth generation dancers were able to share with you their culture and their heritage. Right now we have a salmon bake. We caught the salmon, now we're ready to eat.
Back in Ketchikan, the plains are being readied for two exciting sightseeing trips, one to see black bears, the other a thrilling trip into Misty Fjords National Monument. It's only a short hop by float plane to Neats Creek in the Tongass National Forest. The creek is thick with salmon. Thousands and thousands of chum salmon return here every year to spawn. They were released as fingerlings from a salmon hatchery near the mouth of the bay. For a hungry black bear, so many fish means one thing: the dinner bell is ringing. After a while, the bears are so full they stop eating the meat and concentrate on the protein-rich salmon eggs. Biologists estimate there are 17,000 black bears in southeast Alaska. At places where they congregate, a hierarchy develops. When a larger, dominant bear approaches, the younger, smaller bears drop everything. The last of our top attractions in Ketchikan is a flight-seeing trip to incredible Misty Fjords National Monument. Misty Fjords is the second largest wilderness area in the United States, with over 2 million acres set aside and protected in 1978. There are no roads here. It can only be accessed by plane or small boat. The views are among the most spectacular in all of southeast Alaska as the float planes slip past granite walls polished and scarred by the advance and retreat of mighty glaciers. Some flight-seeing guides have special permits to land inside Misty Fjords National Monument. As the plane glides in for a smooth water landing, their passengers experience one of the sheer delights of the Alaska backcountry, the chance to enjoy the quiet stillness of this vast wilderness. After a photo opportunity standing on the pontoon, everyone loads back up for the scenic flight back to Ketchikan, perhaps a little richer as well for having visited Misty Fjords. Because Southeast Alaska is not connected by a road system, residents have adapted to their environment with a marine highway. The Alaska Marine Highway is a state-run ferry system which connects all the major communities and most of the villages and small towns. It's a vital part of the area transportation. Visitors to Southeast Alaska can drive their cars and motorhomes aboard a state ferry as far south as Bellingham, Washington, and cruise north all the way to Haines and Skagway, where the Marine Highway connects with the Alaska Highway. Once aboard, it's time to put your feet up and enjoy the spectacular scenery along the Inside Passage. Ferry travel is usually laid back and relaxing. Time to get lost in a good book or a card game with your best buddy. This blue canoe, as some locals call state ferries, is pulling into the community of Wrangell. Wrangell is 85 air miles north of Ketchikan. That's about a 6-hour ferry ride. This charming community has a remarkable history. The flags of 3 countries have flown over Wrangell: Russian, British, and American. Over the centuries, this area has also been home to a powerful group of natives, the Stikine Tlingit Indians. The Chief Sheikh's Tribal House is one of Wrangell's top attractions. The tribal house was built as a replica of tribal homes used by Tlingit chiefs throughout the centuries. Inside, it's a step back to a distant time and culture. The Bear Up the Mountain totem is one of several which stand outside the tribal house. Much of Wrangell's fascinating local color can be seen by walking. You soon discover why Wrangell is such a colorful community. During the summer, there's almost always something interesting to see along the waterfront. One of the most amazing sights in all Southeast Alaska is a short drive from the ferry and cruise ship docks to a place called Petroglyph Beach. Scattered along a rocky beach are dozens of petroglyphs. No one knows for sure who carved these mysterious 8,000-year-old images or why. It's one of the unsolved mysteries of the region. Some visitors make petroglyph rubbings with crushed fern leaves and rice paper. We leave Wrangell on a flight-seeing trip. This plane is carrying its passengers over the vast Stikine River Delta. The river delta historically was a vital transportation corridor into Canada. The next stop on this tour of top attractions of the Inside Passage is Petersburg. Locals call their home Little Norway. Petersburg was founded by a Norwegian fisherman in the late 1890s. Soon, Petersburg became a prosperous enclave of hard-working Norwegian immigrants, and it's pretty much the same today. The Sons of Norway Hall is a big, bright reminder of the community's roots. Just about everywhere you look, there's something Norwegian. This is the Scandinavian-style artwork called rosemaling, which decorates many businesses and homes. This Viking ship is put to sea every May during the Little Norway Festival. One of Petersburg's most photographed sites is Hammer's Slough. The weathered homes lining the slough are built on pilings to keep them dry when the tide rises. Even the street is made of wood. Petersburg's busy harbor is the center of activity. And while small cruise ships occasionally pay a visit, most of the action here relates to commercial fishing. It's fascinating just to watch as a variety of boats in all sizes come and go throughout the day. Some are busy offloading their fresh-from-the-sea cargo. Others are in transit to and from the fishing grounds.
Son, got him.
You don't have to be a commercial fisherman to get in the action.
When you feel the fish hit, start biting, just kind of crank her down a little bit and then lift up real slow until you feel the weight come out of the fish, and then stick it. Make sure you put your finger on there so it doesn't spool out as you do that.
These anglers are experiencing a true Alaskan fishing adventure, hauling halibut from the ocean floor.
Well, it's hard to tell when they first hit, you know, they
Yeah,
bang pretty good, and then they just, you know, they take off, but then after that it's like reeling in a sheet of plywood.
When you get your catch to the top, they're not always keepers.
That's why it was so hard to get them in. You had them kind of hooked, you know.
Right in the open mouth.
Yeah.
Where else would you toss back a 20-pound fish? But there's plenty more. And our smiling fisherman keeps trying and trying and trying
I know, I'm tired
until he
already.
finds a halibut that is a keeper.
Open it. Close it.
Now it's time to celebrate fishing success and the 4th of July. The Independence Day celebration includes an old-fashioned parade through downtown. There are also all sorts of contests, including foot races and a boys versus girls tug-of-war. The object of this contest is to see who can stay atop a greased pole the longest.
Stay on top. Just stay on top.
This is the log roll. Again, he or she who stays dry wins.
Stay up there. Stay up there. Don't get too close. He might dive at you.
Log rolls are part of the fun, but logging has its place in the economy here too. A small sawmill still takes the raw material from the forests and turns it into lumber. One of the most relaxing ways to spend an afternoon in Petersburg is simply sitting still and watching. It all seems so peaceful. The fishing boats chugging along Wrangell Narrows. You might even see a bald eagle while you soak up the flavor of life along the inside passage. Sitka is the next stop on our tour of the top attractions of the Inside Passage. Thousands of summer visitors arrive at Sitka by cruise ship. The stately liners weave between the islands and waterways to find safe anchorage in Sitka Sound. Sitka has one of the more beautiful settings in all of Alaska. Located on the outer coast of Baranof Island, it is guarded by snow-capped peaks and protected from the ocean by forest-clad islands. To the west sleeps Mount Edgecombe, a dormant volcano which last stormed to life 6,000 years ago. This peaceful community of around 9,000 rolls out the red carpet for its summer guests. Many of the local attractions are a celebration of the cultural heritage and nature's wonders. Tlingit Indians were the first to call Sitka home. They called it Chi-Attica, translated, the people who live on the outside of Xi. At the Sitka National Historic Park, visitors can walk among 15 Tlingit and Haida totem poles. 2 miles of trails weave among the historic totems. Most of these totems are replicas of poles which once stood on Prince of Wales Island a century ago. The national park is the site of the 1804 Battle of Sitka between Russian fur traders and Tlingit Indians. The Russians bombarded the Tlingit stronghold with cannon fire to avenge the attack on a Russian-America Company outpost 2 years earlier. Sitka's Russian history dates back to 1799. In its glory years as capital of Russian America, New Archangel, as it was called, was considered the Paris of the Pacific. The Russian heritage is celebrated by lively performances of Alaska's most famous dance troupe, the New Archangel Russian Dancers. This is an all-woman dance troupe, and proud of it. It seems that the men of Sitka were once invited to join the fun, but wanted nothing to do with it.
The question most often asked of our group is, why are there no men in the group? Our group was formed in 1969 as a way to promote tourism and our Russian heritage in Sitka. The men were asked to join us, and they said, no thank you. They said, we didn't come to Alaska, and especially Sitka, to dance in our spare time. We came to hunt and fish and to enjoy all of the wonderful outdoor activities. And they said, besides, you'll never get that group off the ground. Well, with those wonderful words of encouragement, we started without them. And 20-some very successful years later, we don't ask them again.
Russian governor had his headquarters atop this knoll. It's known today as Castle Hill.
So this hill is literally one of the most historic places in the entire state because we have three different cultural levels or periods represented here. The Indian village of New Plain, which had 4 clan houses on top.
This area, once home for Tlingit Indians and Russian fur traders, is also where Russia handed over Alaska to the United States in 1867 for just under 2 cents an acre. While visitors walk among the canyons, enjoying views of Sitka Sound, nearby archaeologists are unearthing small details of Alaska's past.
We knew that this was an important site, but we suspected that it had mostly been disturbed by modern construction and that most artifacts that we would find would be out of context. What we in fact found was that when we started testing, we found continuous undisturbed deposits from the Russian period on the beach area on the southeast slopes of the hill. And not only did we find undisturbed deposits, but we were very fortunate in that we immediately got into a layer of wood chips. And we believe that the wood chips made the soil just acid enough to preserve organics that aren't normally preserved. So we have probably at least 10 shoes. We have matting, cordage. We have various pieces of fabric, fur, hair. Amazingly, we have quite the variety of human hair, probably because it was the location of a bathhouse and people were getting haircuts. Sitka has been called the Paris of the Pacific, and a lot of the items that we're finding are consistent with that. It was apparently a very cosmopolitan place. The Russian-American company had a colony in California and one in Hawaii. And some of the items that we're finding are exotics. We found exotic hardwoods. We have bits of coconut shell, hazelnuts, what appeared to be parts of peacock feathers.
A casual stroll around Sitka reveals more of its ties with Mother Russia. This wooden blockhouse is a replica of a Russian stockade which once separated the wooden fort from the Indian village. A century-and-a-half-old graveyard is the final resting place for a Russian princess. This is the Russian bishop's house, completed in 1842. It is the oldest original building in Alaska. For 127 years, it was home for the Russian Orthodox bishops, whose authority stretched from California to Russian Siberia. Restored by the National Park Service and open to the public, the Russian Bishop's House offers another glimpse into Russian America history and life in early Sitka. Sitka's skyline is dominated by the spires and onion domes of St. Michael's Russian Orthodox Cathedral. Completed in 1848, the original St. Michael stood for 118 years until it was destroyed by fire. Sitkans were able to rescue many of the icons and artifacts, and they rebuilt the cathedral from original blueprints. Rain or shine, downtown Sitka is a wonderful place to walk and window shop. The awnings are wide enough to keep you dry, and the shops are inviting, offering traditional souvenirs and Russian imports. Just a block from St. Michael's is Totem Square. It's a good place for a photo, especially if you want to sit on a Russian cannon. The Red Roof Pioneer Home is one of Alaska's state-run retirement centers for long-time Alaskans. A bronze statue of a prospector has welcomed visitors since 1949. Sitka's harbors are filled with craft of all types and purposes. Sitkans have close ties to the sea for recreation and as a way of life. Perhaps Sitka's top attraction is its natural beauty. Several local tourism companies offer sightseeing excursions to explore the nearby waters. Some pick up their passengers right at the cruise ship.
You want to start watching for sea otters.
The Sea Otter and Wildlife Quest takes its guest on a 50-mile excursion along the forested coastline. Wildlife sightings are virtually guaranteed. The sea otter pelt is the magnet that drew the Russians to this area, and today they're a magnet for tourism. The rich waters of Sitka Sound are also the home of graceful humpback whales. A trip to St. Lazaria Island is another local attraction. Tens of thousands of shorebirds use St. Lazaria and other remote islands near Sitka as nesting areas. The bird population includes pelagic cormorants, black oyster catchers, and the colorful horned and tufted puffins.
Okay, there they are. They're out in the middle of the tufted puffin.
Kent Hall is the owner of Sitka Secrets.
I enjoy watching people get excited about wildlife, and I like to see them get excited about things that I like to see, you know, the birds and the critters and the fish, and Alaska is the last great frontier. It's still relatively untouched, and a place where you can come and still see things like puffins and sea otters and sea lions and whales. Not many places in the world like that, I guess, and you can do it. I can do it on a daily basis, and I've been out to St. Lazaria probably 1,000 times since I started doing this, and I still don't get tired of doing it.
Out in the water, you're likely to see one of the estimated 15,000 bald eagles which live in southeast Alaska. This eagle, with its 6-foot wingspan, is swooping to grab a herring. Sitkans enjoy a special relationship with our national bird. Not only do they share the same environment, Sitka has a unique hospital to care for bald eagles and other injured birds of prey. This is the Raptor Rehabilitation Center, the neighborhood health care clinic for injured birds. The mission of the veterinarians and volunteers is to rehabilitate these beautiful birds and, when possible, return them to the wild. The eagles come from all over Alaska to receive expert medical care. Several dozen are nursed back to health and released every year. Education is another big part of the center's mission.
He's a mature male bald eagle. He was brought to our center 5 years ago after he hit a high voltage wire here in town.
The Alaska Raptor Rehabilitation Center was started here in 1980, and it was started primarily for the purpose of taking care of injured bald eagles. But as it turns out, we take care of every kind of bird and every kind of animal because that's what's sent to us. We've established a very good medical center for birds and wildlife. We've got a large volunteer staff that takes care of all the critters. We have a very exciting program year-round for volunteers to come and learn and to serve. We also have a very good program for the summer for people to visit, get a chance to see some wildlife up close and learn a lot about them. It's a very good education center. The center is a private nonprofit. We don't receive any government funding from any government source. All of our funding comes from individuals who adopt our birds or give donations in some other fashion for our center to survive.
Visitors have the great fortune to see and photograph these great birds up close and very personal. Alaska's scenic state capital, the one and only Juneau, Alaska, is our next stop on this top attraction tour of the Inside Passage. Rugged and picturesque, Juneau grew vertically between Gastineau Channel and Mount Juneau. Juneau has several distinctions. Among them, it's the largest city in size in the United States, stretching over 3,100 square miles, although much of this is mountains, glaciers, and ice fields. If Alaska had a theme park, it would probably be Juneau. If you're not in Juneau to celebrate July 4th, there's plenty of other things to do. You can pan for gold. You can walk on a glacier. You can raft a thrilling river and ride up a mountainside. There's so much to do and see, it's too bad that many visitors only spend a day here. All of the major cruise companies call on Juneau. Some days, there are as many as 5 luxury cruise ships tied at the docks or anchored in Gastineau Channel. On a busy summer day, 10,000 visitors might wind up in Juneau at the same time. Walking down South Franklin Street is a good way to discover Juneau.
This way, Loey. Loey. I get a wide-angle lens for you.
A short walk from the cruise ship will take you past or right to the swinging doors of the Red Dog Saloon. This is Juneau's shopping district. Here in the capital of Alaska, you might think you're in the shopping capital as well. When gold was first discovered in Juneau, the high tide came pretty much to the spot right here. Front Street used to front the beach. The architecture is a mix of the old and the new. Many downtown buildings have kept their frontier facades, while just up the street are the modern buildings of government. The walking tour will take you past many of Juneau's landmarks. The Davis Log Cabin is a replica of one of Juneau's first structures. The State Capitol building is where the legislature meets January through May, and where the governor of Alaska has his office. The marble pillars were quarried right here in southeast Alaska. Just a couple of blocks away is the governor's house. Adorned with colorful gardens and its very own totem pole, this white-pillared mansion has been home to territorial and state governors since 1912. The onion-domed St. Nicholas Russian Orthodox Church is the oldest original Russian church in southeast Alaska. The tiny church was built in 1894 and has served the faithful ever since. The farther you get from downtown, the steeper the climb. Where the streets end, the staircases begin. Atop one of these staircases is the home and studio of artist Ree Munoz.
Juneau is very unique for all its staircases, and I love to paint the staircases. I don't know how many staircases there are in this town, but I live at the top of 182 steps myself, which helps me stay in shape. The mountains are beautiful. I don't paint scenery as such, but the background of the mountains is just absolutely beautiful. I'd never seen a Russian church before I came here. And here is this little jewel of a Russian church right in Juneau, right downtown. The waterfront, once in a while, once in a blue moon, you see a whale come in here. And rarely, but you do. And all the fishing boats that are in this area are fantastic to paint, of course.
While the natural beauty and friendly atmosphere of Juneau attracts many people here, the first attraction was gleaming in the gravel beds of Gold Creek. Two prospectors, one of them named Joe Juneau, were led here in 1880 by Chief Cowie, an Indian guide who knew about the rich gold deposits. The discovery led to the founding of Juneau and several decades of prosperous hard rock mining. The last of the big gold mines closed due to wartime pressures in 1944. But there's still gold in them there hills. Panning for gold is one of the recreational pastimes offered by local tour companies. These prospectors are standing very near where the founding fathers first found color in Gold Creek. With a little bit of instruction, just about anyone can learn to swirl a gold pan and find color. Juneau's #1 visitor attraction is 13 miles from downtown, the Mendenhall Glacier. This incredible river of ice flows 12 miles out of the Juneau ice field in the Coast Mountains. The glacier stretches 1.5 miles across the valley. The Mendenhall is one of the few glaciers in Alaska you can actually drive up to, making it one of the most popular attractions in all of Alaska. Here you can watch nature at work, the carver of mountains and valleys, a remnant of the last ice age that has been here for the last 3,000 years. The Mendenhall Glacier is located in the Tongass National Forest. The National Forest Service maintains walking paths and trails, allowing visitors to learn more about the advance and retreat of glaciers and how they transform the landscape. You can even hold a piece of the glacier. Incredibly, this tiny iceberg fell as snow in the Coast Mountains at least 80 years ago. The Mendenhall Glacier is currently in recession, melting back towards the mountains. Its furthest reach down the valley was about 1 mile from the present location. Helicopter tours have become an extremely popular way of seeing Mendenhall Glacier. Not only can you see the rugged spires and look deep into crevasses, some tours land on the glacier, allowing visitors to walk on this imposing river of ice. From atop the glacier, you can see the large rocks and boulders scraped off the mountainsides. 20,000 years ago, nearly all of southeast Alaska was covered by ice 4,000 to 5,000 feet thick. A total of 38 glaciers flow from the Juneau ice field, a giant 1,500 square mile lake of snow and ice. On the ice field, it's perpetual winter. And it's one of the only places in southeast Alaska where a team of Alaskan Huskies can take you on a sled dog ride. Sled dogs are a big part of life in many Alaskan communities. Annual races like the Iditarod Sled Dog Race cover over 1,000 miles of Alaskan wilderness. This is how Alaskans living in rural areas traveled before there were snow machines or airplanes. It's a great adventure in one of the most spectacular settings imaginable. If you don't mind getting wet, a wild rafting trip down the Mendenhall River might be just the ticket.
Okay, is there anybody came here to stay dry? Sorry, it's not gonna happen.
This attraction starts at the north end of Mendenhall Lake with a little instruction and a lot of protective water gear.
Go back and tighten down on the straps. If I get it too tight, just let me know. I don't want to cut off any air circulation. That's a good one, Ed.
The trip takes you across
Alrighty,
Mendenhall
fantastic. Now, what
Lake
ship are you guys on?
with more spectacular views of the glacier.
See those 7 peaks? They're at 6,700 feet, and they're called the Seven Sisters or the Mendenhall Towers. It's where the glacier begins.
Then you enter Mendenhall River for a mostly mild ride, with the occasional rapids thrown in for good measure. For these rafters, the adventure ends in an appropriate melody.
Down the street. Oh, baby. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream.
Another of Juneau's great adventures is a combination flight-seeing trip and salmon bake at Taku Lodge. The excursion begins on the docks in Juneau, where float planes wait to whisk their passengers to nearby Taku Lodge on the Taku River. The planes take off right from the Juneau harbor. Taku Lodge is situated across from the hole-in-the-wall glacier.
At the bottom of the dock, you see the path to the lodge. There was a bear up in the yard.
This is really rustic, and it's also home for a family that doesn't mind company in the summer and solitude in the winter.
The opportunity to live up here and make a living up here and enjoy the beauty that's is so obvious, and the quietness. Granted, we have a lot of visitors here throughout the week, but we have our quiet times up here as well. And it's just the best of all worlds, staying up here doing that. As far as visitors coming up here to enjoy it, the package is so diverse. A float plane ride, you have the trip over the ice, so you can see the different aspects from the higher elevation down, looking down on the glaciers. You'll see the river valley where you can find an occasional moose or bear walking around in the flats. And of course up here, we think we have a real nice yard and trail system for, you've got a meal that people really rant and rave about. We are proud of our meal, but that's by all means not the main reason to come up here and visit us. Our trails, and of course the wildlife that lives in our yard or that we share their yard with is sometimes well worth the trip on its own.
One of the most fascinating attractions in Juneau is the Gastineau Salmon Hatchery. The $7 million hatchery opens to public view the fascinating world of Alaska's salmon.
The Pacific salmon get one shot at spawning.
These are chum salmon, fighting their way up a salmon ladder to return instinctively to the place of their birth. This life and death struggle is seen through an underwater viewing window built into the fish ladder. In all, over 160 million salmon fry are reared and released every year. Of those, over 100 million are chum salmon, 50 million are pink salmon, and the balance are king and coho salmon, released mainly for sport fishing.
That he's crowding up to the head end of the raceway. And so if you can see the ones that have the great big teeth, then you're able to identify the male.
After spending 3 to 4 years at sea, usually only 1.5% of the salmon make it back to their release site to spawn. For the chums, that's 1 to 2 million fish. Of those, 60% will be harvested by the region's commercial fishermen. This boat is part of the Gastineau Hatchery's cost recovery program. The hatchery is allowed to harvest some of the fish they've reared and released and sell them to local fish processors. The money raised pays for much of the hatchery's expenses. The next of our top attractions in Juneau is an uplifting experience. From dockside, you'll be uplifted aboard the Mount Roberts Tramway. The trams take passengers straight up the mountainside, 1,800 feet, to a nature center. The panoramic views of Juneau and down Gastineau Channel are the kind usually reserved for eagles. At the nature center, you find yourself in a lush forest near treeline. It used to take a rigorous hike to get this far up the mountain, but now hikers of all ages and ability enjoy the fresh alpine air, the incredible vistas, and maybe a wedding day kiss. All day long, the trams carry passengers up and down Mount Roberts. At the end of the day, you can watch as God paints the Alaskan sky with a glorious sunset. Our final top attraction in Juneau is a cruise to Tracy Arm, 50 miles south of Juneau. Tracy Arm is a magnificent 25-mile-long fjord where rock walls rise dramatically from the fjord's edge and countless waterfalls cascade in an endless flow into the sea. At the head of Tracy Arm are the South and North Sawyer glaciers. There are so many icebergs clogging the fjord that you know it is only a matter of time before the glaciers let loose again with a thunderous cracking and roar. Next stop on the Top Attractions tour is Skagway. This is Skagway, Alaska, a fun-filled, colorful frontier town at the top of the Inside Passage.
Now the next building coming up was the Boss Bakery, the Nicholas chapter.
It's a town of dance hall girls and gold pans a-whirling. A town of false-fronted gold rush buildings and steam locomotives chugging towards the gold fields. Skagway is home of the Klondike Historic Gold Rush National Park. Virtually all of downtown is made up of structures that have been around since Skagway was hacked from the wilderness and tens of thousands of gold-hungry stampeders made their way north. The rush started in 1897. In July, news flashed around an economically depressed United States. Gold was discovered in Canada's Klondike. Almost overnight, steamships were packed with gold-hungry men and women hoping to strike it rich. The rush was on. The route followed the inside passage much the way that cruise ships travel today. At the northern end, they docked at either Skagway or Dyea. This eagle's eye view shows Skagway in the distance and the tidal flats where Dyea once stood. The Chilkoot Trail out of Dyea was considered the shortest and easiest route to the Klondike goldfields. However, the 33-mile-long trail was not for the faint-hearted. After landing with their goods in the tidal flats at Dyea, the Klondikers faced a 3,246-foot climb to the summit at Chilkoot Pass. Once the trail emerged above tree line, the miners clambered up a boulder-strewn hill leading to the summit, a place which became known as the Golden Stairs. The Chilkoot Trail begins 8.5 miles from Skagway. Every summer, hundreds of hikers from all over the world retrace the historical steps. These campers carry backpacks with food, fuel, and clothing enough to last 4 days. But in 1897, Canadian Mounties required the stampeders to take a year's supply of food and goods into the Yukon. The way was hard and often cruel. Gold Rush-era photographers captured forever this view of an endless chain of stampeders, their rigorous journey repeated over and over. With a ton of goods to take to the Klondike without help, it could take a person 3 months to haul their supplies to the summit. In 1897 and 98, as many as 30,000 stampeders crossed over Chilkoot Pass. But the boom for Dyea quickly turned to bust, and today, unlike Skagway, little remains of old Dyea. The forest has reclaimed the hotels and gambling halls, trading posts, and real estate offices, all of the wooden buildings which had not already been destroyed or dismantled and moved. This is the Slide Cemetery, the final resting place for victims of the Palm Sunday avalanche of 1898. Up to 70 men and women were caught in their tracks by an avalanche which plunged down the steep slopes at Chilkoot Pass on that windy April morning. While the Chilkoot Pass was the early favorite route, Dyea ultimately could not compete with Skagway, thanks to the railroad. The White Pass and Yukon Railroad was under construction in May 1898 and completed as far as Lake Bennett the following summer. Visitors to Skagway can still travel the same narrow-gauge tracks in vintage rail cars. The White Pass and Yukon Railroad is one of Skagway's top attractions. The White Pass Railroad replaced another infamous Gold Rush route, the White Pass Trail, also known as the Dead Horse Trail. Before the railroad, packers and pack animals were pressed into service. Nearly 3,000 horses died on the trail during the Gold Rush. The route leaves Skagway climbing 2,885 feet in 21 miles. The crew that built this narrow-gauge wonder did so without the aid of heavy equipment. Only picks and shovels and blasting powder to move the rock and carved tunnels through the mountains. Near the summit, portions of the original White Pass Trail are still visible. You can almost imagine the train of horses and men, lured by gold waiting for them in the streams of the Yukon. There's a lot of history waiting for visitors to Skagway. Virtually every building has a story. It's said that a friendly ghost still haunts the Golden North Hotel. The Red Onion Saloon dates to 1898 and was both a saloon and a brothel. Over 20,000 pieces of driftwood decorate the Arctic Brotherhood Hall, home of a fraternal organization founded in 1899. This cabin was the home of Captain William Moore, founder of Skagway. He staked his claim to 160 acres in 1887, 10 years before the rush. It's all this history that people come here to see.
Skagway's been playing host to northern travelers for many years. There have been several booms, the Klondike Gold Rush boom and the bust after that, the boom during World War II, and now the most recent tourism and restoration boom in our town. See, Skagway was fortunate. It never burned down. Unlike most other northern towns, Dawson, Nome, Fairbanks, even Juneau, Skagway never had a major fire in its downtown historic district. And so the core group of historic structures never, ever was lost. Individual buildings were lost to fire, but not the whole town. And so what we had in the early 70s was a core to work with when the Klondike Gold Rush National Historical Park was formed. And since the cruise industry has increased over the years, tenfold really since 1972-73, you have a situation that allows for private enterprise to get involved in helping recreate the historic district. We have brand new buildings that are being built that have old style architecture and old time elements to help fit into our historic district. And it makes Skagway into a living, breathing, dynamic visitor destination.
If you didn't belong to the AV, you can wander into the Mascot Saloon on the right side. Open for business today. Boy, already a crowd gathered inside. Wouldn't you like to own them?
The Skagway Streetcar Company was founded in 1923 by Skagway's very first pioneer promoter and tour guide, Martin Itchen. He gave a tour to President Warren G. Harding during Mr. Harding's 3-hour visit to Skagway. And Harding liked the tour so much, Martin said, I'm onto something. And for the rest of his days, every summer, he would put on his only good suit, his black undertaker's suit, and drive the Skagway streetcar. He was the local undertaker, Ford dealer, coal delivery man in town. Martin wore a lot of hats, but the streetcar company is, as such, the oldest sightseeing type of tour in Alaska. It's the last of the old-time city tours.
Why don't you come on over here and let me put
Another top attraction is Madame Jan's Gold Rush Camp at Liarsville. This tent camp in the woods is a place infected with gold fever. Modern-day Liarsville is built on the site of a real Gold Rush-era tent city. Today, Liarsville is a place where costume characters spin tales and retell stories of the gold rush. And then you get to pan for gold yourself.
Is this the dirt you started out with, or are you digging on the bottom?
No, that's the dirt I started with.
Yeah, well, you're being a little timid with getting rid of the dirt, that's what it is. Got to get rid of it eventually, might as well do it already. 5 pieces of gold right there. Hot dog.
Gleam, gleam. Oh, there.
The thrill of finding golden flakes at the bottom of your pan is one way to experience the excitement of Skagway's colorful past. Another is at the tables inside Skagway's Eagles Hall. This gambling is purely for entertainment, and all part of the Days of '98 show. Back in 1898, the gambling halls of Skagway were wild and unruly. Many new arrivals were fleeced of their grub stake before ever heading to the gold fields.
Right up, we're going to Alaska!
Back then, the king of the town was a con man named Jefferson Soapy Smith, portrayed in the Days of '98 by actor-entrepreneur Jim Richards.
This is like our show in here. We've just taken Soapy Smith's illegitimate con games. We've attempted to legitimize them, and we're fleecing the transients. You know? And how long, you know, I've been doing this thing for so long now that I've been soapy longer than Soapy was soapy, you know. So that's kind of a fitting tribute, I guess, to the con man, you know, because his image and everything lives on.
Soapy Smith was said to be all things to all people. He was the self-proclaimed leader of a band of about 150 ruffians, thieves, and murderers. He also gave generously to churches and led an effort to feed and care for stray dogs. He was both patriotic and an unabashed swindler. Soapy's saloon still stands in Skagway. In July of 1898, Soapy met his end in a gunfight with town surveyor Frank Reed. He was buried outside the boundaries of Skagway's Gold Rush Cemetery. Frank Reed was fatally wounded in the same gunfight. His tombstone is the largest in the cemetery. He died a hero. The names of many of Skagway's first citizens are carved on wooden markers. They came north for gold and glory and will be remembered forever for the exciting times in which they lived and died. Our next stop on this tour of top attractions of the Inside Passage is Haines. Haines is just a 15-minute flight by small plane from Skagway. Before the first white men came here, Haines was a native trading post. In the native language, it was the end of the trail, a place where the local Chilkat and Chilkoot Indians met and traded with Indians from the interior. Haines borders 20 million acres of protected wilderness, including Glacier Bay National Park to the west. This is the Chilkat River. This glacier-fed river braids through the scenic Chilkat River Valley. The scenic Haines Highway borders the river and offers many scenic way stations and photo opportunities like this fish wheel. One of the best ways to explore the valley is on the water. For centuries, the river has been used as a way of transportation. Today, summer tour operators offer both jet boat excursions as well as float trips. If they're lucky, passengers will see some of the wildlife native to this area, including bald eagles. The Chilkat River is famous for the largest gathering of bald eagles in the world. But the big event doesn't happen in the summer. The gathering of bald eagles is winter's top attraction. Over 3,000 bald eagles converge on a short stretch of the river called the Council Grounds. It's an eagle convention with only one purpose: dining on salmon. A warm current keeps a 5-mile stretch of the river open even during the coldest months. Between October and January, these eagles gorge on a late run of spawned-out chum salmon. The action occurs right next to the road and is one of the best opportunities to watch and photograph bald eagles. While summer guests won't see this gathering of eagles, there are many fascinating attractions in Haines. This is Fort William H. Seward, the first permanent military site in Alaska. From 1904 till 1946, it served as an army post, but today the fort's buildings are in private hands. The Chilkat Center for the Arts at Fort Seward hosts the famous Chilkat Dancers, another top attraction. Through song and dance, this community group interprets the stories and legends of the Chilkat people. These dancers are wearing Chilkat blankets. The Chilkat people perfected the art of weaving these blankets, which took a year of hard work to complete. Made of goat wool, They were highly prized among Northwest Coast Indians and usually only owned by the wealthy and nobility. Nature in Southeast Alaska has its own prizes, places that are like precious jewels. One such place is Glacier Bay National Park, just west of Haines. Glacier Bay National Park encompasses over 3.2 million acres. It is a land of enormous tide-water glaciers, barren rock, and coastal forests. The park is home to a variety of animals. Over 220 bird species migrate here. Both brown and black bear inhabit the land, and marine mammals swim the seas. Most visitors to Glacier Bay arrive by cruise ships, which journey as far as Johns Hopkins Inlet. A concessionaire and several small tour operators also take passengers on trips into Glacier Bay. Seeing the park is like seeing Alaska as a newborn infant. The protected waters are also a favorite of kayakers. In a kayak, you can travel close to the shoreline, close to nature. The experience of sharing a cove with a humpback whale is like no other. Several dozen humpback whales use the waters within or nearby Glacier Bay. This group of whales is feeding at a place called Point Adolphus, near the mouth of the bay. These whales spend the winter months in the warm waters off Hawaii or Mexico. They return to Alaska in the spring and summer to feed in the rich waters. The waters are also the fishing grounds for orcas, also called killer whales. Orcas travel in family groups and either feed on salmon and fish or on marine mammals. They are not true whales. They are actually the largest members of the porpoise family. From Glacier Bay, we travel across the Gulf of Alaska to Seward on Resurrection Bay on the Kenai Peninsula. Seward is a gateway community. Many cruise ship passengers will leave the shipboard luxury bound for Anchorage and places farther north. Seward is also the gateway to Kenai Fjords National Park. A short drive takes you to Exit Glacier within the national park. 8 other glaciers reach tidewater and are usually seen from aboard one of the many sightseeing boats which head out from Seward's small boat harbor. A trip along the water has many surprises in store. You might have a chance encounter with whales.
I know. There, a little tail. All right. Did you see the bottom of the tail, how white it was?
During nesting season, you're guaranteed to see puffins. This puffin rookery looks more like a busy airport. It's where 20,000 tufted and horned puffins make their nests. These sea lions are hauled out at the Chiswell Islands. The number of stellar sea lions in this part of Alaska are dramatically declining, and researchers are not exactly sure why. But when the answer is found, it may come from work being done right here in Seward. This is one of the newest residents of Seward. His address is the Alaska Sea Life Center. The Alaska Sea Life Center is a combination research, public education, and rehabilitation center for marine mammals and birds. The Sea Life Center opened its doors in 1998, and it's one of the few places you can see science on display. The center features giant aquariums and underwater windows where you can see the seals and sea lions, and they can see you. It seems to be fun for everyone. From the second floor of the center, you can watch the harbor seals from above the water. Just a few feet away, this 1,500-pound sea lion is trying to find a comfortable place on his very own haul-out. We'll end our top attractions tour with a quote from naturalist John Muir. He wrote over a century ago, "To the lover of pure wildness, Alaska is one of the most wonderful countries in the world." The wildness of coastal Alaska is the top attraction. Without the mountains and glaciers, the whales and the seabirds, the Inside Passage would not be the same. Lucky for all of us, most of Alaska remains purely wild, and it remains one of the most wonderful places in the world.